Good afternoon, everyone. I think we'll save that for the audience. On behalf of the National Museum of American History and the Smithsonian Institution, let me say how happy we are that you are all here. Welcome to Festival ADA, 25 years of disability rights. And happy birthday, ADA! Yes! We are live streaming this. If you Google, what is it, Aaron? Ustream. Did you all hear that? National Museum of American History. You will find it. You can also get it off of the ADA schedule page on the museum site, and we will have a permanent record of it. Eventually, we'll caption it and put it up. Does everyone see or hear have tactile access? Just checking. We have volunteers on hand to address any issues. There's assistive listening devices in the back if you need them. The hashtag for all events we're using is what everyone around the country is using, which is hashtag ADA25. The museum also is AM History Museum. So we'll be tweeting throughout the afternoon, and those of you who are speakers with Twitter accounts will tweet at you, so you'll have that in your feed. I'm Katherine, Curator, here at the museum, and we're audio recording also this historic event. I can't tell you how happy and excited I am that we're doing this, because actually we're making history in a new way here this afternoon. Thank you to the Smithsonian Latino Center for supporting this event. Ronald Woodeman is here from the center, and he will give you greetings in person. Ronald?
Thank you, Catherine. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. Bienvenidos todos y todas. I'm really honored to be here with you today. My name is Ronald Woodeman. I'm the Exhibitions and Public Programs Director at the Smithsonian Latino Center. And I'm here to echo Catherine's welcome to all of you. And really, more than anything, I think what's most appropriate is to thank you and really the disability community for changing the world. And most of the time when we talk about changing the world, it's usually an exaggeration, but the ADA is no joke. It has completely transformed so many people's lives and our notions of what inclusion really is about. Obviously, this is the responsibility that is for each one of us, and I want to acknowledge a certain curator that's right behind me here at this museum, the National Museum of American History, for really pioneering collecting around this topic, and for more than that, for really introducing the values of disability studies to the Smithsonian, and famously, nothing about us without us, right? In particular, I want to thank local deaf Latino activist, Gabriel Arellano, who a couple of years ago called our office, emailed me actually, to just talk about programming with us and doing programs that served his community, the Latino deaf community. So I really want to thank him, because that email has really changed my practice and my office's practice, and obviously I think in general across the institution we have a long way to go to really meet our ideals or aspirations of what inclusion really means. That said, let's appreciate how groundbreaking and amazing this conversation is at this museum, and not only for the viewers that are here right now or watching it via the live stream, but who will be hopefully viewing this conversation in classrooms in the future. So that said, let's thank all of you. I want to thank all the presenters that are here today. And again, without the disability activists actually at the table, this conversation wouldn't really mean much. So without further ado, Catherine, come on back, and we can get the program started.
Thank you, Ronald.
Thank you. Gracias.
So I have the briefest of introductions, because this afternoon is about getting what is inside the heads of our presenters out. So there's a record of it, and we can talk about it. This is the second symposium of this sort that we've done, focused on Latinos, history, and disability. The first one was last February at Texas State University in San Marcos, organized by my colleague John McKiernan Gonzalez, who's moderating the next two panels after this one. We're both historians. John's moderating, as I said, the two panels, and we're hoping to keep this going around the country. We're planning to do a subsequent symposia at Berkeley and in Chicago and in New York City. That's our plan to take over.
Great.
So we'll enlist all of you as appropriate. Our goal basically is to get more awareness and understanding and discussion going around the country about Latinos and disability. I have had some questions about why Latinos from my colleagues.
Yep.
And the answer is really simple. There is no larger demographic group that is less served and less understood in relation to the history and culture of disability. There just isn't. Mm-hmm. And it's way overdue to get more understanding nationally and locally as well, because we all know that respect and understanding go hand in hand with exposure and knowledge. And famously, someone said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So it's time to get on the menu. So let's get to it. Yeah. So we intend this to be a series of conversations over the afternoon with people who know a lot about this, who live it, work in it all the time. So I'm not going to give long introductions. They're experts with deep experience. That's pretty much enough said. Trust us, they know what they're doing. So first up we have Kathy Martinez, who is Senior Vice President, Disability Market Segment and Strategy at Wells Fargo, former Assistant Secretary of Labor, former Washingtonian, however briefly.
5 years.
And former Executive Director of the World Institute on Disability. And she'll be speaking with Dr. Fabricio Balacazar, a professor of Disability and Human Development at the University of Illinois, Chicago, UIC, as it's known in the trade. And their conversation is about the history and political dynamics of policy and services. Note that the topics for all 3 sessions this afternoon are pretty similar. There's a lot of overlap. So we'll start with some basic questions for the 2 of you. And this is meant to be interactive, so we'll do a couple of overall questions between the 2 panelists, and then everyone in the audience is free to join in the discussion, because we want this to be really rich and experiential, and you all have knowledge also that we want to share and get in the record. So my first question is, what is the experience of Latinos and Latinas related to disability? Has it changed since the ADA? And how important has the ADA been to Latino communities? Wow.
And are you addressing that to?
To both of you.
Oh, okay.
I know neither of you are shy, so.
Well, I think, I can talk about my personal experience being a Latina with an evident disability, because I think the experience is different for people with evident disabilities as opposed to non-evident disabilities. So I'm hoping the experience has changed. For me, I found that growing up as a blind person, I found it was sadly much easier to be a disabled person if you assimilated and kind of became more white, as it were. Fortunately, I grew up in a very large Latino family with lots of cousins and aunts and uncles, and my sister and I, she's also blind, we're the 2 middle of 6 kids. So fortunately, I feel like I had, in some ways, I was very lucky because I had a wonderfully supportive family who did not really know about disability services. They did not, they had never really dealt with disability. And I also was, they moved to California from New Mexico, and so there was some very innovative new services that were just kind of coming online, so to speak, for people with disabilities. But very often, my sister and I were the only Latinos in that group of disabled people, like young blind kids. I think as we got older, more Latinos were part of the group. But I also think, depending on your generational experience, I ran a project called Proyecto Visión, and we noticed, of course, that so many Latinos did not take advantage of the social safety net or the disability service delivery system, and very often it was people who were newly immigrated to this country, or people who the services were not available in Spanish. Very often people would get out of a rehab hospital if they were injured and go back to an inaccessible situation where they didn't know about, they weren't told about independent living or attendant care or access. So I hope it's changed, and I want to let Fabricio talk too, so I'll stop.
I think you point out to a very critical aspect of the whole process of integration and assimilation into our culture and our society. I think that for the people who have been here for a longer period of time, there is much more understanding about their rights, their sense of entitlement, and capacity to integrate. But this is a constant struggle if you are dealing with a population of individuals who are migrating and is becoming acquainted and starting from scratch all the time. So in a way, it creates an ongoing challenge because those newcomers face the same barriers in terms of awareness, understanding, and knowledge about the services and about the opportunities that the laws, and I'm not saying only the ADA, but all the laws covering rehabilitation and education. So that's a challenge for our population. The new generations are always in need of education, critical awareness, critical understanding of what are they entitled to and what are their rights. So yes, it creates a perplexing paradox for constant. It's a never-ending challenge in a way.
Well, would you say there's strong awareness of the ADA among the people in the communities you work with?
I think it's growing, and as more things are available in Spanish, it's growing. I think, in our community, there tends to be, and this is just my experience, but there tends to be a high level of shame. And so, and I think there also tends to be fear of utilizing the public services because of, sometimes because of immigration status. But I think the awareness of the ADA is growing. I think, like Fabricio said, but we're constantly having to educate, because if people are here they're newly here, they often don't understand the concept of a social safety net or the concept of attendant care. But I think as more and more people are on the internet and as more information is available in Spanish, and I think people see other people around. You see a lot more disabled people on the streets than you did 25 years ago, right? So a lot of it is because of physical access, and a lot of it is because of changed expectation of the society. But I think there's still pockets of neighborhoods that are primarily all Latino, where there's still many people that are not, that don't go out, and it's just something we have to change.
I think something wonderful happened, which is that the older generation of immigrants, Latino immigrants who have been exposed to the whole process of integration and assimilation and going through with their children to the school process and so forth, many of these leaders are taking a more proactive stake in educating the newer generation of immigrants. And it's wonderful to see. In Chicago, there is a group of parents of children in the autism spectrum, and they have about 300 families associated with a diagnostic clinic at our university and in my department. And they have created this group, Grupo Salto, and their goal is to educate these new families about their rights, and it's all run by all their parents who went through that. They no longer have children in the schools, but they see the value and the need to continue to educate these newcomers about their rights and the opportunities that the laws, including, IDA, the Rehab Act, and now the ADA provide them. And it's difficult for newcomers to become familiarized with all these menus that are not readily available. I have had multiple conversations with teachers in the school district in Chicago. And one of the norms that I see across the board, and not only CPS, Chicago Public Schools, but across many schools, and I have a son that has a learning disability, so I have to go through the IEP meetings and so forth when he was a little kid. And it is that nobody actually tells anyone what are all the opportunities and services available, especially in the schools. It looks like, the people who have more resources, they find a lawyer and they come with a lawyer or some advocate, and these people know what to ask for and they get it. But most people don't really know. So they are in the hands of the goodwill and the good heart of a case manager or a special education teacher that said, you might need PT, or you might need OT, or you might need, language therapy or whatever. And, because everything costs money, then it creates a tension about how much do I tell you about these things versus another ones. And I feel that our population of Latino kids is vulnerable to being left out, to being discriminated in that context because they don't know and they don't ask. And if you don't know, then it becomes easier for you to, don't offer things that are going to be costing money.
Before my next question, I want to say a special welcome. I think members of, and here goes my Spanish, Trabajadores Unidos DC, is that, who just came in, who are
Welcome.
workers.
Bienvenidos.
And they're members of, Amiguelis, which is the caravan of Honduran migrants who were mutilated by the train La Bestia.
Oh,
Great.
Oh my gosh.
bienvenidos.
Welcome. So
I
glad
saw you guys in Univision, and I learned that you guys were walking all the way here. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, thanks
Yeah.
for coming.
Thank you.
And please join in the discussion. It's great. So my next question is, how have the issues changed over your careers when you first started working, or have they, that you were, the things that were coming up all the time in your activist work versus now? Are there different things? How have they changed, or what?
Well, things have definitely changed.
Yeah.
They have changed. But I will say, as somebody who has multiple identities, as everybody in this room does, I took a shot at, I shouldn't say it quite like that, but I took a try at, as a young, as a teenager, I worked in the farm workers youth movement. And it was very interesting, to be in a movement that was primarily Latino. Really nobody understood blindness, but we ultimately found something that I could do. It was way before computers. I'm pretty old. And this was way before the ADAs. This is like in the late 70s, to be exact. So, I think things have changed. I am very heartened that, that the disability community is starting to look at race as an issue, because there is a higher incidence of disability in both the Latino and the African American communities. And the sad thing, and this is kind of related to what Fabricio was talking about, the sad thing about disabled children, primarily boys, is that so many boys with disabilities, primarily learning disabilities, are ending up in the juvenile justice system.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a real serious problem that both communities have to deal with, because it's happening to primarily African American and Latino kids. But I think things have changed. And you know, I really, as somebody who's both Latina and disabled, I have, and so is Fabricio, really worked to kind of weave the two communities together. And I know Horacio's down there, and Renee, and all you, Brigida, all you guys have really worked to kind of weave the issues of the disability community and and the Latino community together. And we've all worked together for a long time to do that. And I would hope that as leaders, you know, we do mentor people who are both disabled and or Latino to be a part of our activism. And I think in terms of my jobs, oh yeah, I mean, who would have hired a disabled Latina 25 years ago? Probably not too many people. But now I think, you know, with mentors from both communities, I've been able to do my jobs. I mean, it's not like it's been an overnight success, but it's definitely changed. And I think, you know, the more of us are out there, the more it gives people, you know, the comfort to be out and, you know, out if you have a non-evident disability, or to have multiple identities, because we're not just, you know, our disabilities, and we're not our Latino-ness, we're everything, you know, we're all a bunch of multiple identities. So I think the more we get groups talking to each other like this, the more of an understanding there will be.
So
In
what's changed in
92 or 93, we got the first and only grant that was awarded by the Department of Education to assess the impact of the ADA in the Latino community. And back then, we went to the Latino neighborhoods in Chicago and started asking questions to these owners. And very often they say, well, Americans with Disabilities Act, I am not American, so that's not for me. And in other cases, they say, no, we don't want those people here, you know, they are gangbangers. And in other cases, it's like, no, they never come here. Of course, they could never come here because you have 3 steps in your door. So it was very interesting, but in a way, expected response. There was a lack of awareness, lack of concern, lack of care for serving the population, I would say across the board. The only exception were a few of the banks. They always want people to bring their money. And of course, McDonald's and those people that they have corporate. But the small businesses were by far totally ignorant or removed from the whole experience. I think that has changed dramatically.
Oh, go ahead.
It's 25 years, so it has taken that much to enlighten people. And now new constructions, new businesses are much more supportive, much more understanding, much more aware. Of course, there is a combination of policies, local ordinances, some enforcement, especially when people do remodeling and they need to, you know, comply with local regulations and the federal guidelines for accessibility and so forth. Plus, it's obvious for anybody that walks into the streets how different the city is now, because there are ramps and, you know, and curb cuts and things that didn't used to be there before. So overall, I would say that the shift has been slow, but in the right direction and positive.
I want to give an example. So when we started Proyecto Visión, which was a project that many of us in the audience worked on to increase employment opportunities for Latinos with disabilities, I went to the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and this was, in like 2003 or 4. And I said, we would like to work with you around and help you hire people with disabilities. And they said, there's no way. We wouldn't want people with disabilities in our businesses because they cost so much money, and these are our own people. So we talked to them more and more, and I know that many of you remember that by the end of Proyecto Visión, and this was every, in Chicago and Miami, the chambers were part of our conferences, the local chambers. They just through working with us and seeing that people could actually contribute and could hold down jobs, they changed their attitude. And now at the Department of Labor, there's a project called Add Us In, which is working with small businesses and chambers. And the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is a part of that, that group. Yes. So there has been some change. And really to hear what the guys said to us when we asked them, would you guys want to be partners? They really said, I would never want to put a person with a disability out front because people would feel sorry for them, and it would make my business look bad, and it goes back to this shame factor that I'm talking about. But so that has been a remarkable shift in attitude.
Yes, and I would like to add that it was Kathy's leadership and credit that actually created ADA25, and I was fortunate enough to be one of the recipients of this funding. And the project in Chicago has been quite successful. And one of the things that
what did you do?
One of the things that was key in our approach to this whole process that is being proven in the literature as a best practice is getting the kids in the job site on paid internships. Having the kid working on the site really demystified all those myths about, they are going to get sick, or they are going to fall, or they are going to, whatever. And they realize that they are committed, hardworking, punctual, or, regular people. And some are not, and then get fired. It doesn't matter, but they are regular human beings like everybody else. And it really changes the perception of the employer to have the student working with them. And for the student, getting that paycheck, often, because in some cases, the families never tell them that they were getting this welfare money or whatever, and this is like the first time that they get this money in their hands, and they are elated. I mean, they really value, and they see the future, and they see the possibilities. And so it works both ways for the employers to change their minds and eliminate those barriers and prejudice, because now they see the person working with them. What we also did was to make it easier, so we have a contract with a local charter school, and they place the kids, they do job development, and they also pay the kids directly with funds from VR. VR is supporting the whole thing, and the employers don't have to do the paperwork and all the massive documentation to get VR to reimburse them, but we simplify the process for the employers. He said, do you need any training? We'll get the training. Do you need any certification for these kids to be working with you? We'll get you the certificate. We hear from the people from Burger King that they saved last year almost $40,000 in training costs just for all the kids that were placed in the different stores. So for the employer, they were very happy with that to tell us, we save a lot of money, plus these kids are working great. One of the kids was promoted to manager in one of the stores. So they are doing a great job, and the employer realized that these are excellent workers.
Well, I have a lot more questions, but I want to see if people out there have questions, either come to one of the mics, or we have runners who will bring a mic to you if you have a question. And if you're signing, please come to the front so the interpreting team, as well as the audience, can see you better before asking your question. So here we have one here. Please say who you are and then give us your question.
Hi, Jennifer Laszlo Mizrahi from Respectability, and I want to thank you for this wonderful event and for the great work that all of you have done professionally. And I wanted to ask you in particular about boards of directors. That so often in the disability community, when you see the C-suite, the chief executive officers of the nonprofits in our own advocacy community, or if you look in the philanthropic space of who sits on foundations, you don't see people with a variety of disabilities or a variety of backgrounds. It tends to be amazing people or ADA warriors who are white and use wheelchairs. So I wanted to ask you specifically about leadership levels for Hispanics and people with a variety of disabilities, particularly aimed towards the younger generation and getting them on boards of directors of nonprofits, companies, et cetera.
Well, first of all, you're a genius for thinking that. And, you know, we have been saying, many of us, that the only way we're going to really change our community is to get on boards, and not just of disability organizations, but you know, everywhere. I just, you know, you're right to ask this question, and I think we don't venture out enough. You know, I realized that in the middle of my career as an assistant secretary, you know, I was proselytizing about people getting jobs and getting jobs in the private sector, and you know, and we've got to really break that barrier. And then I realized, you know, I should do that. I'm telling everybody else to do it, so so I did. And I'm not on any boards yet because I'm pretty new at Wells Fargo, but eventually I will be. And one of the things that they actually recommended to me, or somebody, one of my superiors, recommended, was that yes, they would like me to be on, you know, on nonprofit boards, but maybe it'd be a good idea if they weren't disability organizations, you know, another type of nonprofit. And I thought that is very forward thinking, you know, because my instinct would be to get on a disability organization board. Not that that's a bad thing, but I think they're right to kind of, you know, why not have you know, why shouldn't I think about going on another type of board? And so, yes, you're absolutely right, Jennifer.
I think the best model we have in the country are the independent living centers that are mandated to have a 51% board composition of individuals with disabilities. Now, whether or not that has become a growing bed of potential board members, and whether or not there is transfer of leadership between those boards and other boards in the community is a good question. And I think, honestly, that there is not enough transfer of leadership from that group of individuals to, you know, other boards. And I think probably there are a lot of education that needs to be done and that we all need to do moving forward in terms of allowing more opportunities. You know, one thing that is a real problem overall is that there is not enough training in the country about what is the meaning of being a citizen. You know, citizenship training. I would love to see more of that in our schools. What does it mean to run a meeting and being able to know the Robert rules of order and understand what it means to be in a board? I think that's important, you know. We are, after all, a democracy, but we have moved away from general participation. When we were a small nation, and my history lessons, there was much more town halls, and people will come together and they will make decisions together. We have moved away from that. Yeah. And it's like we need to consider how important it is for our kids to learn to advocate, to learn to run meetings and learn the Robert rules and become more proactive, because there is this sense that we as individuals are nothing. And yet, the world is being changed by individuals or groups of individuals. It's always a small group of people that come together, and especially young people. People like us, we are out of the picture. We are getting out. But the young people, they are the ones that can transform the world. And almost every social movement that has any kind of significance during the last 20 years in the world has been driven by young people.
Well, so here's my selfish or self-serving question. As a historian and curator then, who are the figures we should be teaching young people about? People who have or had a disability or Latino, who were leaders or not even leaders, who lived their lives and made a difference. Because I want to collect this stuff. I want to document it so we can teach others.
Well,
So who do you know of? Who comes to mind?
besides Frida Kahlo and Chavela Vargas, does anybody know who that is? Chavela Vargas is a singer in Mexico, Mexican singer, who was also a lesbian, and she jumped out of a window and became. I mean, she wasn't in a wheelchair, but she had lots of different disabilities. I think she died not too long ago, but she lived to be very old and was quite a character. And right now, I just can't think of anybody else.
Was she a good singer?
Oh yeah, she's
Oh, that's
amazing.
good. That helps.
Oh yeah.
Ansel Dua, people always mention her.
Oh, Gloria Anzaldúa.
She always comes up.
Okay.
I think it's hard to identify key players at the national level, but I will take it
Regional, take regional.
I will take it more as a personal level,
Horacio.
because at a personal level, almost everybody knows somebody.
Right.
You see, the experience of disability is not a foreign experience. Eventually, we all get disabled somehow as we age, and the more we age, the more likely we are to have some kind of disability. In the Latino community, the onset of illnesses related with overweight and diabetes is really, really serious. So I will say young people don't need to look too far, but even within their own family, to come across the experience of disability. And I think we need to do a better job in helping people understand that disability is something that is not unusual or unique, but it is part of life, and as such, we have to take it as something else that happens to all of us.
You mentioned earlier about migration being an important factor in how Latino communities understand disability and relate to services. Are there can you say more about that one? And are there other factors as well that are unique to Latino communities that have a powerful presence or modulating effect on understanding of disability?
It is complex because it's related to issues of the region where the people are coming from, the class of the people involved, the race of the people involved, the level of education, which is connected with class, and the previous experience or not. There are great separations between levels of urbanicity, for instance. Mexicans from the Distrito Federal are very different from Mexicans from rural areas in Mexico. They have a whole different cosmology about how they perceive themselves in relation to the world, and it's very, very particular.
So could you give an example of how that would affect their understanding of having a disability or someone else with a disability?
These people come here, let's say to a school district, and they have no clue, and they are asked, what do you want? Or to VR services. And these people in this desk ask them, well, tell me what do you want? Set some goals. Some of these people have never been asked, what do you want? They have been told, do this, do that, never. So they don't even have this sense of, what do I want? I never had that question asked to me. So you have to even start at that level.
It's true. That is so true. I remember one time at a conference, at a Proyecto Visión conference, we wanted to do some, I mean, this was very, I guess, very, I don't know what the word is, but, you know, I think we were just so caught up on our own culture that we never thought to we asked people to brainstorm, and they didn't even, you know, we were so kind of, you know, so used to being, you know, in a certain culture in Berkeley, California, that we, you know, a lot of these folks were recent immigrants and had no clue. So it was a real, you know, wake-up call for us to sort of, you know, you got to meet people where they are. There's got to be multiple points of entry, and it can't always be through, you know, the white middle-class lens.
Yes. So in VR, I have been consulting with VR in Illinois for the last few years, and we are trying to communicate the message.
VR.
Vocational Rehabilitation is the program that is the result of the Rehab Act of 1973 that created a national program to help people with disabilities become employed. And that pays for education, evaluations, technical assistance, supports, equipment, etc. It's a very effective way to support people with disabilities who want to work to actually get employed. The challenge is this white middle-class mentality that created a system that is applied to everybody regardless. So the system, when you have people who don't have that, fails. Because these people, unless they are trained and the counselors actually spend some time working with them, preparing them, educating them, at least some basic empowerment process and goal setting and helping understand what are the things that they want or they could pursue. If that energy and effort is not made, those people are most likely to just disappear.
Yeah. Are there efforts? Oh, we have a question. Yes.
Go
Please
ahead.
identify yourself and then let's have your question.
Hi, my name's Conchita Hernandez, and I kind of wanted to answer a question instead of ask a question.
Good. Sure.
So you asked kind of another thing that's a unique barrier to people with disabilities that are Latino, and a lot of things that I'm running across is a lot of young people who have a disability who are Latino that are undocumented, and so you can go through school and get an IEP and you have a right to a K-12 education, and then college comes around and then you do not have access to voc rehab, you do not have access to independent living centers or any other type of services that are in the state. And then now we have a unique set of individuals where now we have DACA, so which is for young people who graduated from high school here, where they can work legally in the United States, get a Social Security card, but they do not have quote-unquote permanent status. And so they still are not eligible for voc rehabilitation services, even though they have a work permit. And so I work with a lot of young people who are in that situation, and it's really kind of a difficult struggle where you're trying to empower them and have them be their own advocates, but yet they can't access the services that are in their community that are there for them.
That's a great point.
Very true. And it's a very difficult challenge that we are living right now, because as you know, our country is very divided right now, and there is no consensus, and people are not willing to compromise. So we are kind of stuck in the middle here, and there is actually an active movement to even get rid of DACA. So among, you know, some people. So yeah, it is a real challenge. I just hope that you need to continue your political activism. Don't give it up. Yeah. Because if you give up, who is going to do it, you know? So keep fighting, keep bringing it up. Try to get your friends and brothers and sisters to continue to speak out. In a way, DACA came out because those kids didn't give up, and they didn't stop. And there were many setups and setbacks and, you know, challenges throughout, but they made it. So my advice is keep fighting. I mean, we have to keep trying. I know it's going to be difficult, and it's not going to be soon.
You're not alone.
Yes. But you have to fight, keep fighting.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leila Izquierdo. I'm a representative from Trabajadores Unidos de Washington, D.C. And my question is, what is the connection between the ADA and immigration policy? And what I mean by that is, what do you guys believe should be done by the fact that hundreds of immigrants that are crossing the border are getting injured by the train or by any other way, and they're losing limbs and legs, yet neither their government or the U.S. government is doing anything about it. You know, the U.S. government pours millions of dollars into border patrol and building fences, yet they aren't really contributing any money or anything towards people like Amirelis. And then my other question is, what do you think should be done about immigrants that are injured here, like construction workers, that are also undocumented, that, you know, may fall off a building or something, yet they don't receive any benefits and nothing is done for them?
Kathy?
Well, obviously, you know, it's a very tough situation, and I really am not aware of what if there is any special, or if there's any coverage around immigrants under the ADA. I'm just not familiar with what's, you know, if the law does address that. I mean, obviously, people become disabled every day because of jobs like factory work and construction work. And, you know, I think, I mean, I'm not representing anybody except for myself when I say this, but, you know, I wish that there would be something that we could offer them.
I guess this is a good time to ask if there are lawyers in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mr. Luna, I think.
I do have.
Yeah.
This
Renee?
is Renee Luna. I work at Access Living in Chicago. And with regard to the ADA, even preceding the ADA, there was Section 504 of the Rehab Act, which requires government entities to provide accessibility, reasonable accommodations, and not discriminate on the basis of disability. People who are deaf and hard of hearing and are going through a process, or people who are blind and have other disabilities, for example, they can't write very well, or they have a speech impediment or something, they're entitled to a reasonable accommodation under Section 504, and that continues in the ADA under Title II, Public Services. So in terms of immigration status and the Homeland Security, was formerly INS, they do have responsibilities to meet. They don't always meet them. We've had to file complaints with, ironically, at that time, the Department of Justice was supposed to have conducted 504 evaluations, and they didn't. So we reached settlements, and because deaf and hard of hearing people weren't getting access. So things should be improving, and you should know those types of reasonable accommodations do help people. And in regard to the section on part on trabajadores who haven't acquired an injury on the job, they can certainly get workers' comp. Many are fearful of doing it, but they're entitled to it. Many states are trying to limit the amounts that they can get in settlement and even who applies and all of that, but people are entitled to workers' comps. You know, it's difficult because they're undocumented, and the employer always will threaten that they'll get them deported. So it's not an easy question. Some of it has to be case by case.
Thank you for helping us out there, Renee.
It's almost, I would say, an issue of human rights too, because if you have a tourist that is run by a car, are you going to let that person sitting down in the street? And Horacio mentioned that yesterday in a conversation that we have. Are you going to let that person, you know, die there just because? And you are going to ask that person, "Excuse me, are you legal or illegal here?" What is the humanity about this whole situation? No. So from a human rights perspective, all those workers have the right to be treated, and they should be treated, because they are here. I mean, you know, if you have an accident somewhere in your vacation, you would expect to be treated you know, if you happen to have that to you. So there is that dimension about basic attendance or basic care of health issues and concerns when people get injured in the job.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
So I was wondering about another factor that has been written about here and there, the collectivist culture among many Latino groups, and is that breaking down, or is that one of the reasons people don't seek services versus the more middle-class white Anglo individual, you're kind of on your own, or you're rugged, you should do it on your own? Is that, do you think that's an issue, or?
I think the many cultures, you know, the kind of individualist traits that we value here are considered kind of counterculture, right? They're considered, you know, it's not right to just think of yourself in certain cultures, and especially in some of the native Central and South American cultures. You know, they're very collectivist, and you don't draw attention to yourself. You don't, you know, it's really about the group. And so, yes, I think that, you know, just I think coming here, if you're part of those cultures, that's a big shock. And I think I've been told by folks when I was running Proyecto Visión, like, why would we want to, you know, helping, if we give this our disabled family member services, you know, that's sort of singling him out. And then, you know, what about all the other family members? You know, and there was also you know, there was a big fear too around letting their family member go to work or go out. You know, there's this sort of kind of overprotectiveness, but also that family member did have a role in the household. You know, I met a family. I don't know where they were from, Oaxaca, and they were from one of the native tribes, and I don't remember the name of it, but you know, that person was blind, their family member was blind, and I was again being, you know, kind of a not very sensitive American by saying, you know, you should really, do you want to get work? And the blind person said yes, and the family said no. You know, they have their job is in, you know, in the house to help us with dinner and help us so that we can go out and work. So, you know, I think that that is an issue.
Yeah. I think we clash. There is a clash of cultures.
Yeah.
Because throughout Latin America, we don't glorify so much individualism the way this American culture does. We tend to acknowledge that we are interdependent, and there is no shame for us, you know? Here, there is even a diagnostic. If you are too interdependent, we can classify you as some kind of deviant behavior, and it is in the books. I am a psychologist, so I know a little bit about that. But I think it's nuts, because there is nothing wrong, in my opinion, to being interdependent. I think it's wonderful, you know? It's boring to be by yourself. Who wants to do that? I don't, certainly don't. I need others. We all need others. We are vulnerable, and we have to rely on each other, and there is nothing wrong with that. So a lot of families experience challenges when thinking about this concept of independent living.
Yeah, exactly.
Go for independent living. I'm not going to let my son or daughter be by themselves. That's not the concept. So there is a little bit of that tension.
How does that interact then with seeking services? And are there intergenerational conflicts around getting services, or?
Wow, wow. You know, I know Renee probably hears this a lot, but again, when we were running Proyecto Visión, you know, we talk about attendant care services, and so many of the families would say, we don't want somebody else coming in and getting our disabled person out of bed. That's, you know, this is a family issue, and we take care of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there are some very serious cultural differences around that type of, and I imagine though, and this is a question for Fabricio and Renee and Horacio, is, you know, if you're from the middle or upper class in Mexico and Central and South America, very often they have people, they have people come in, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so is it a class thing, or is it, you know, is it just that we, you know, that we tend to feel that disability is a family issue?
Well, it is a class thing if you are there, because you could afford the maids.
Right,
But
right.
if you are here, you can't. But the one thing that I have noticed that was a tremendous improvement in the law that allow family members to be hired
Yeah,
for personal care
Yeah.
services.
that
So
is
now,
a change of
yes,
the
so
law,
that
and
was a
that's great.
positive shift
Right,
that really allow the intimacy of the family to remain, but acknowledging the effort and the energy that goes into taking care of a person with severe disability.
Do you know the origins of that change? Who was pushing for that?
I imagine it came from the people. Do you know how that happened, Kathy?
no, but it was a good change, and, you know, not just for Latinos.
For
any-
everybody.
For
yeah.
everybody that wanted a little extra family income
Yeah.
and prefer that their family members do the work. Now, there is a flip side to that, which I think needs to be discussed and, or at least mentioned, and that is that very often, you know, we heard of, you know, some cases, and I'm sure this happens in every culture, of, you know, of abuse where, you know, where it might have been a good idea for an outside person to go into the house, but, you know, where you know, let's just take I'll give you an example of the mother was doing the personal care for the disabled person. You know, she was just completely stressed. So, you know, there was some abuse that occurred, and you know, we heard about it just because we were the only game in town around Latinos. But you know, it ended up having to, you know, they had to deal with it through the county. But you know, sometimes that can be the case too. You know, where the family is just so overworked and stressed out, and so in those situations, it might be a good idea to have a care worker come in.
I talked to the former director of VR in Illinois about this situation, and he mentioned that they have to do audits across the state to, you know, occasionally, because, you know, there is this occasional report that the media sometimes trying to use, and some politicians also trying to blow up out of proportion to suggest that there are very serious problems with the program. And he told me that that is not the case, that there are a few instances,
Yeah.
but that is not the norm. The program works, the families are happy, their persons are being taken care of, and for the most part, with a few exceptions, the program is working its intent.
Well, the next thing I want to know about from you guys has to do with change over time, because it's history, around terminology and diagnosis, and how, like, there, like, terms like autism and ADHD and things like that within the communities you work in, and how statistics change because of changes in terminology and awareness and diagnosis. And so how are some of those more common diagnoses today, how do they play out within and over the last 20 years or over your careers? Does that make sense?
Go ahead, Fabricio. You're probably more familiar with this than I am.
It's a complex issue because there has been significant increases in some areas of disability, and autism is one, that are associated with multiple factors, and it's very difficult to determine which one in particular is there, but has to deal with diet, with practices, with families waiting more years to have babies, and the males deteriorate, and they increase the risk of having defective sperm be part of the process. The older the man is having the babies and so forth. And apparently, there are some studies that suggest that there are issues in that dimension, in addition to some other environmental factors. I think that overall, the main progress has been in the way the media characterize disability, and how we have as a society moved away from pity into more dignified way of embracing and accepting and recognizing disability in society as a more, normal experience that people might have. So, although there is this growth in some areas, there is also much more positive framing and understanding of the experience of disability. And I think the media, the Latino media, has been very positive in terms of embracing appropriate terminology to educate the community about what disability is, what are appropriate ways to refer to disability, and ways also to accept and recognize people with disabilities in society.
I mean, even the terminology, for so long we were invalidos, right?
Yes.
And I guess, even the term for blind, ciego or ciega, kind of, in my mind, depicts a beggar. I don't know if they're still using the term no vidente, but I think just us defining who we are and us defining what will be called, our own terminology, has also helped.
Yeah.
Just move the conversation, and as Fabricio said, just turning the tables. Shifting the paradigm from, the medical model that people with disabilities have to be fixed or cured, to the socio-political model saying that society has a certain level of responsibility for making itself accessible, has made I think that's in terms of. Well, yeah, there's been a significant change, and in terms of diagnosis, yeah, I'm not really familiar with, with the numbers in terms of, the diagnosis around ADHD and learning disabilities and autism. Those are certainly disabilities that have, ramped up in terms of numbers in the last 20 years.
Yes, especially learning disabilities has tremendous growth, and ADHD too.
So what in your day-to-day jobs, what would you say is the most rapidly changing day-to-day issue that you have to deal with, that's really hard, it's so slippery, you have to keep track of it, and it's just rapidly unfolding?
Well, I'm in a brand new business. I never thought I'd work for a bank, but so I've only been there 4 months, and day to day, I am learning about a company that is 266,000 people and has about 70 lines of business. So I am still on a very steep learning curve. And just the culture of what is the culture? It's just, I came from a place, a job where everybody was conscious about accessibility to.
This is government.
Yep. Most
Federal
people,
government, yeah.
Most people were conscious. I worked within the disability community, so to a place where we have a huge opportunity to help people understand the whole issues of access. So, I definitely put myself way out of my comfort zone, but I'm getting more comfortable. I'm learning, but it's been a real experience, and I'm thrilled. I mean, I couldn't have picked a better place to go, because there's a real willingness, to improve and to change. And so yes, every day I am learning about something completely foreign to me.
In my case, I will say, because I work very closely with the school districts and the VR, it pains me to see that they are constantly faced by shortfalls in funding. And I sometimes wonder what is our priority as a nation. We seem very eager and willing to spend millions of dollars in bombs that will blow up in a minute and cost millions and millions and millions of billions of dollars almost in the industry. And yet very unwilling to spend a few $100s in people that need more services. So I think that we as a society need to come to grips, I feel, to our priorities. We seem to have those priorities upside down. You know, we seem to favor blowing things up and not helping the people in need. So it's not that we don't have the money, it's that we make choices about how we spend those funds in ways that are not, in my opinion, favoring the most vulnerable people in our society. And I think that those people, many of them are very well intended in the work that they are trying to do, but they are constantly challenged by the lack of resources in doing their work and providing the services and fighting for a nickel.
What cross-disability alliances do you see taking shape, and are they across ethnicities, across disabilities? Is there work happening that you know of?
Well, I know that the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights for a while was working pretty closely with the American Association of People with Disabilities. And then, of course, there's also the National Disability Leadership Alliance, I hope I'm saying that right, which has been, very cross-disability. I mean, I guess, in the next 25 years, I would like to see organizations like the National Council of La Raza and, get more interested in disability as a topic, given that Latinos do have a higher incidence of disability. And Fabricio mentioned our astronomical incidence of diabetes and diabetes-related disabilities. I would like to see, the Urban League and NAACP become more. I would like to see us work together more. That's all. And I think it would benefit both the disability community and the various people of color communities.
I think the ADA was probably the best expression of unity of people with disabilities coming together with a joint agenda. Groups that had been divided in the past by the way they play the money game and forcing people to be fighting with each other for the crumbs. And that was overcome when the ADA was enacted and people came together as a solid single voice. And I think that we shouldn't forget that as a nation and continue to use that as an example of what is possible. Because then afterwards, the same games are being played and people keep fighting for the little crumbs.
Yeah, I look at the old footage of 504 in the Bay Area, and it looks so diverse, like everybody was in it together. And then you look at stuff today, images today, and it seems more silo and people are more divided.
Correct.
And I don't know if that's just in the nature of the record that survived, or if that's really true.
It's true.
And do you find that, is it regional, or is it in Chicago? Is that what you find? And
I'm sure that Renee and some of the other speakers later today can explain this better. But the issue is that the funding formulas, in a way, stimulate competition. So there are pockets, and they are departments, and there are departments for mental health, and departments for developmental disabilities, and departments for, and everybody is kind of segmented, and you don't get here, you go there, and no, you don't get served here, you go over there, and it stimulates competition for the funding. It stimulates this is my thing, and we only serve this group, and if you have this combination, you are out. Like mental health and DD, for instance, is like they don't know what to do when a person with developmental disabilities is depressed. It's like, okay, so it became complicated right there. So there are tensions that are, the result of the old structures and the way they have divided the different agencies. And then agencies have their own budgets, and they fight for their budgets every year, and they get sometimes the same cuts or not. So that complicates the whole process.
I think we're toward the end of the first session. Any other questions? We'll take a 10-minute stretch break to unmic us and remic the next group. I remind you that we're live streaming, and you can get it off of the museum's schedule of what's happening today. And the other thing is, if you Google Ustream, yeah, an American History Museum, you will find it. And eventually we will caption it and have it permanently on the site. This is thanks to our fabulous theater manager, Keith, who's up there. There are things inside and outside the museum. We're much cooler in here. And
In many ways.
yeah, exactly. So we'll take a 10-minute break for the interpreters who we'd like to thank, and we don't want to overwork. And so we'll be reconvening in about 10 minutes. Thank you.